Hi everyone, I am GBS Role and I'm in charge of the file system interface, which is the chapter 11 of the book. Alright, so what is actually a file system? Well, the file system uh, was used in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. There are some disadvantages of the file system, one of which is the accuracy of the data as well as the security. But again, the because of the file system, the database management system today exists. I have here the four different objectives of the topic. The first one is to explain the functions of the file system, to describe the interfaces of the file system, to discuss file system design trade-offs, including access methods, file sharing, file locking, and directory structures, and to explore file system protections. Now, what is actually the concept of the file system? But for that, for most users, the file system is the most visible aspects of the operating system. It provides the mechanisms of online storage and the access to both data and programs of the main operating systems and all the users of the computer system. Now, the main objective of the file system is the data sharing. Because of the data sharing, um, because of the data sharing, access of an information system is much easier. Now, how do we access the file system? Well, what we have here is there are different types of various storage media. The first is the magnetic disk and tapes as well as the optical disk. The operating system abstracts from physical properties of its storage device to define the logic storage unit. Computers can store information in various storage media such as magnetic disk, magnetic tapes, and optical disc, so that the computer system will be converted to use. The operating system provides a uniform logical view of stored um, information. The operating system abstracts from the physical properties of storage device to define the logical storage unit called the file. Files mapped by operating system and to physical devices. These storage devices are usually non-volatile, so the contents are persistent between system reboots. Now, what is actually a file? So, file is a name of collection of related information that is recorded on the secondary students. Now, for most students uh, who studied in the 1990s as well as in the early 2000s, all of them are actually familiar with the file system. Unfortunately, nowadays, there is no file organizations. Most schools don't offer now the file organizations. So that's why if you're going to ask students about the file system, they always said, we do not know, but what we know what a database management system is. Now, there are three different structures of the files of the file system. We have the text files, the second is with the source file, and we have the executable file. Later we'll be discussing what are these types of structures. But before that, what we have here are the file attributes of the file system. First is the name. So the name, it is a symbolic name. It is only information kept in human readable form. So meaning it is a readable form, so meaning it is understandable. Example of the name is the last name, the first name, the address, the email address. So those are a readable form. Those are human readable. Next we have is the identifier. So this is actually a unit tag. I mean unique tag, usually a number. Example of this is the ID number. So definitely the ID number is unreadable. It is non-human readable form of life because in the file system there is an automatic or a random generation of number. The next will be the type. So this information is needed for systems that support different types of files. Example of which is, let's say, if it is a character, if it is numeric, um, those are the examples of types. The next is we have the location. So this information is a pointer to a device and to the locations of file on that device. So we are referring to the locations or the path of the file. Next we have here the size. So the size, we're referring to the bytes, the words, or the blocks. So in the file system, actually, especially in COBOL, all you have to do is, let's say the name accepts 30 characters, so there is actually X30. So next, protection. Access control information determines who can be reading, writing, or executing, and so on. So we're referring to the access rule here. So if I am an admin, so I do have access most of the functionalities. If I have a guest, so my access is limited. If, let's say, if I am a limited user, so definitely I have a limited access on the file system. Next we have here the time, date, and user identification. So this information will be kept for creation, last modifications, the last use. This data can be useful for protection, security, and usage monitoring. Alright, so the next is the file operations. So mostly the file operation is, well, as we all know that the file system is an old one. So the file operations of the file system is a little the same when you use a database management system. So the file is an abstract data types. So we have here the 6 different types of operation. This is an abstract types. We're referring here on the abstract types. So the first is creating a file. The next is you have a writing a file. The third one is reading a file. Fourth one is repositioning within a file. Fourth is deleting a file. And sixth is truncating a file. So I think all of us already knew what is the meaning of creating a file. So this is actually the first step. So this is actually the first phase in the file system, and it must be found for the file. The second step is writing a file. So to write a file, we make a system call specifying both the name of the file and the information to be written to the file. The next is we have the reading a file. So when we say reading a file, we simply fetch data from the file system. So we use a system call that specifies the name of the file where the next block of the file should be put. Next we have here the repositioning within the file by referring to the directory search for the appropriate entry. The next is you have deleting a file. So absolutely, if we want to delete a file, we have to search it first, the name of the file, and if it is found, so we release all the file space so that it can be reused by the other files. And the other one of the abstract data type is truncating a file. So when we say truncating a file, we're referring to the user may want to erase the content of the file but keep its attributes. So notice that the 6 operations actually a little the same when we have a database commands. So these 6 basic operations comprise the minimal set of required file operations, but we still have the 2. We have the open and the close. So most of the time in the file system, the last one is closing the file. Okay, next we have here the several pieces of information associated with the open file. We have the file pointer, we have the file open count, we have the disk allocation of the file, and we have the access right. So what is the file pointer, by the way? So the file pointer, we're referring to the location of the read and the write. So the system must be tracked. This is actually about the tracking, by the way, of the read and write locations. Whereas the file open count, we are referring to the counter here. So it actually counts multiple processes maybe opened a file, and the system must wait for the last file to close before removing the file table entry. The next, we are referring to the dist location file. So most of the operations require systems to modify the data within the file. And the last one is which is the access rights. Each process opens a file in an access mode. So this operation is stored to the peer process table, so the operating system can allow or deny the subsequent input-output rights. So I do have here the different types of, this is actually one of the structures of the file system. What we have is the file types. So the file types, we have the executable, the object, the batch, the markup. This is up to multimedia. So I think all already knew the usual extensions. So for example, if we are referring to the .rb, so we are referring to the Ruby source of code. So definitely it belongs to the source code. If it is an exe, so it is executable file. If we're referring to the zip, so we are referring to the archive. If we're referring to the MP3, MP4, or any multimedia, so we're referring to the multimedia device. And let's say if it is a JPEG, so I thought it is a photographic file, so it is not actually, it is a print or view. So these are actually the different types of files. Now, in the file system, there are two different types of the access methods. We have the sequential access and we have the direct access. So from the word sequential, so it is the simplest form of the access method. Information in the file is processed in order one record at a time. So we are referring here to the sequential access. So meaning, let's say if I have 1,000 records and my record belong to the record 900, so definitely it will, since it is sequential, so it will actually trace the record from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 899. And the second one, which is a direct access, so also known as a relative access file, is made up of fixed length logical records that allows programs to be read and write records rapidly in no particular order. So meaning, what is actually the difference between the sequential access and the direct access? The sequential access, in terms of accessing the data, it is much slower than the direct access. For what reason why the direct access is much faster than the sequential access? The reason is, in the direct access, the accessing of data, the modifying of data um, has no particular order. So let's say so again, also in the direct access, the access is not actually the same with the sequential, which is actually, from top to bottom. Another one, what we have here is, now if you have background on COBOL or in C, or if you have, let's say if you tried programming and text files in C or in C++, so definitely you understand the different access methods. Another other types of method is the index. Well, the index is actually a combination of the direct access method or a combination of a relative method. So in the index method, it is actually the same with accessing the book. For example, if let's say if I want to let's say if I have a book here, and then I wanna um, I wanna read a record of Obama. So definitely I will not I will not start with letter A. I will not start with letter B. I will not start with letter D. But in the index book, I'll go immediately to the letter O. Okay. So the index, like index, is the back of the book contains pointers. So to find a record in the file, we first search in the index and then use the pointer to access the file directly to find the desired record. Alright, so this is actually the implement. Notice that in that slide, we have here the different sequential different access methods or implementation method. So we have in the left side we have the sequential access, and the right side we have the direct access. So notice that in the sequential access it's using actually the reset, the read next, and the write next. So most of the time it is actually sequential. What we have here, this is the index file. So definitely, if I'm going to search Smith, so I will not. Well, I will not start search with letter A. I will not start search with letter C. I will not start search with letter D. So definitely, I'll go directly to letter S in the index file. So in the and then, all right. So after that, um, um, it get the record through the relative file. Okay, let's proceed to the directory and this structure. So most of the time it is advisable that we need to partition our 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 data. So a storage device can be used entirely for the file system. It can be subdivided for finer grain control. So what is actually the advantage of dividing or partitioning the directory? Well, the main advantage is a control, an absolute control, a finer grain control. If we want to, if we're going to divide the directory. So, for example, each volume contains file system and must also contain information about the file system. So this information is kept in entries in the device directory volume table contents. So the device directory, more commonly known as simply as directory, records information such as name, location, size, and type. Okay, so the next is the directory overview. So the directory can be viewed as a symbol table that translate file names into the directory entries. So we need to know, or we need to keep in mind that the operation that are to be performed in the directory. So I think you already know what is a directory, so there's no need for me to explain this one. So the first is search for file. So search for file, we need to be able to search directory structure to find the entry of a particular file. The next one is create a file. So new files need to be created and added to the directory. Next, we have the delete file. So we're referring to the file that is no longer needed. The next, the fourth one is we have the list directory. So we need to be able to list the files in the directory and the content of the directory, enter each file in the list. The fifth one is we have the rename file. So because the name, well, actually it's actually renaming a file. Next, we have the traverse the file system. So if we may wish to access every directory and every file within the directory structure. So for reliability, it is a good idea to save the contents of the structures of the entire system. Alright, the first type of directory is we have the single directory. So notice that it is the simplest directory structures is the single level directory. All files contained in the same directory, which is easy to support and understand. So notice that the file cat has its own directory. The file has its own directory for bool, for a, for test, for data, for mail, for count, for hex, as well as for the records. A single level directory has significant limitations. However, when the number of files increases or when the system has more than one users. Well, if the next is we have the two-level directory. So this is not actually a binary system, right? So we're referring here to the two-level directory. So as we have seen, a single level directory often leads to confusion file names among different users. The standard solution is to create a separate directory for each user. So that separate directory is called a two-level directory. Now in the two-level directory, each user has its own user file and the directory. So the UFD, we're referring to the user file directory, or simply as the UFD. So the UFD have similar structures, but each list only file the single user. So that slide, it has no title. But that slide is we're referring to the tree structured directory again. Tree structured directory. So once we have seen how to view the two-level directory as a two-level tree, the natural generalization is to extend the directory structure to a tree directory. So in other words, that the tree structure directory is the extension of the two-level directory. So again, the users to create their own subdirectories and to organize their files accordingly. So this is actually much better. Why? Because there is actually a good keeping of files. Next is the file mounting system. So what is actually a mount? Well, a mount here, I think you already know what is actually mount here, so I am not referring to the mounting here, but I am referring to the file mounting. So what is actually a file mounting? So file mounting is just a file and must be opened before it is used. So a file system must be mounted before it can be available to process on the system. Well, the mount procedure is actually straightforward. The operating system is given name of the device and the mount point. So the locations within the file structures where the file system is to be attached. So some operating system require that the file system type is to be provided, while the others inspect the structures of the device and determine the types of the file system. So actually this is I never encountered the file mounting on the file system, so my apology. So that is an example of the mounting. To illustrate that figure, the file mounting, consider the file system depicted in the left side of the image, so where the triangle represents subtrees of directories that are interest, and whereas it shows that existing file system where the image in the right side shows unmounted volume residing on a particular path or directory. So at this point, only files on the existing file system can be accessed. So that is actually the advantage of the file mounting. Alright, so what here is the file sharing. So again, the main purpose why there is actually a file processing system is actually to sharing a file, sharing a data. So this is actually, well, in the database also, this is actually common. So in the file sharing is very desirable for users who want to collaborate and to reduce effort required to achieve computing goals. Now, most of the business today's, most of the business nowadays, well, we are referring to the banks, for example. So they do have actually file sharing. Okay, so some has only one central database. Some banks have more than 3 databases, 2 of which are actually mirror database. So the first is the multi-user database. So when an operating system accommodates multi-users, the issue of file sharing, file naming, and file protection become preeminent. To implement sharing protection, the system must maintain more file and directory attributes that are needed in a single user system. So mostly the the computer attached, the the client computer has no access. What I mean is, um, the um, the client computer has a limited access. So meaning it has only for example in the banks. So in the banks, when you deposit or when you withdraw, so notice that the only update there is actually the account remaining account balance of the clients. So example of the multiple users in the business, we have the banks. We have, well, mostly banks. We have the let's say Cebu Pacific, the reservation system of the Cebu Pacific. Next, we have the remote files. So the remote files, we're referring to the network that allows the file sharing of resource spread across the campus or even around the world. One's obvious resource to share its data in form of files. So we're referring to the client-server model. There are two types. We have the server and the client. So when we say server, we are referring to the machine containing the files, and the client, we are seeking. We are referring to the machine seeking access. Next is the distributed information system. It provides unified access to the information needed to the remote computing. So these are the two different types and categories of the remote file systems. Now, what we have is consistency semantics. So, consistent is very important in the database, not only in the database but in the file sharing. I mean, file system. So, it represents an important criterion for evaluating any file system that supports file sharing. These semantics specify how multiple users of the systems are accessed shared files simultaneously. We have a different type. We have the Unix, we have the session, and we have the immutable shared file semantics. Next, we have the protection. So again guys, protection of the data, protection of the file system is the main concern here. So if you want to keep safe from the physical damage or the improper access, so example of the physical damage is, for example, there's an electrical spike there. Okay, so that is an example of, of, of a physical damage. Example of the improper access is this: someone access which is not supposedly has the access. Okay, next we have the reliability. So is generally providing by duplicating copies of the files. Alright, what we have here is the different types of access. We have the read. We are referring to the read from the file. Write, we are referring to the write or rewriting a file. Execute, load the file into memory and execute it. Append, write new information at the end of the file. Delete, we're referring to deleting the file and free space for possible reuse. And we have the list, is the list name and attributes of the file. Now, speaking about access control, this is actually common. So many systems recognize three classifications of users. We have the owner, we have the group, and we have the universe. So the owner, we are referring to the super admin actually. Probably we're referring to the user admin here, and the super admin, or we're referring to the admin. Next we have the group. So it is actually the set of users who are sharing the file and need similar access is a group. So the group has another term of group is a limited user. So they do have access on a different type, and the other one has a different access to another type. Next we have the universe. So all other users in the system constitute the universe. So probably we're referring here to the guest users. Alright, that's it for my report. Thank you very much, and have a nice day. Once again, this is GB Terol. Bye bye.